Actually, we're going to take a little side trip again, like we did to start our last class last week, and talk a little bit about this guy here. Oh, it went the wrong way. I got to make sure I know which way to push the button. Anybody know what this is? Nobody's as interested as much in science as I am. Pardon? It's actually the James Webb Telescope. If you remember, we talked about that to begin with a little bit last week, about some recent discoveries or recent observations that were taken by this brand new telescope. And the reason I bring this up again is because this is a class about Genesis, and this definitely has to do with beginnings. The word Genesis means beginnings. And I showed last week this slide that over the last couple of months, what this telescope has been viewing or previewing, seeing, and it has a lot to do with the origin of the universe. And it's exciting because it's showing that the evolutionary philosophy is just not working as far as how, and you may not know that evolution is something that many believe are the way that biological beings came into existence. Of course, that's not true. God created each one of us, created our Adam and Eve and all the animals in the beginning, as we studied back in Genesis 1. But the same thing is believed about the universe, that it started with a big bang. Well, let me go back here for a second. Here, just so to show you what this is the field view of the telescope in this area. And these are magnified views of galaxies now they're seeing as far out as they're able to view. And I'll go to the next slide here and talk about this for a minute. About 13.5 billion miles, or light years, I'm sorry, not billion miles, light years, which is much further than miles. So what does this mean? Well, the point is that evolutionary science says that back this time here, where they're seeing now these galaxies, which let me just pop them in here. This telescope is seeing galaxies back here where they say there should be none. So on the right, you've got the Big Bang, and on the left here, you've got present day, the way our universe is. Let's just say this right here is the Milky Way galaxy over here. And then going back, as we look out into space, so many light years and great distances, what evolutionists expect to see are immature galaxies. And when you get back this far, they're only thinking that this is where the first stars were made, this many, just a couple billion years after the Big Bang. That's what the philosophy says. That's what the ideology is. And so for them now to start seeing galaxies as big as the ones that are today out this distance, because they think not only is this 13.5 billion light years, but that it's 13.5 billion years ago, which of course isn't accurate. That's a whole different study. All this was made at once, if you believe what the Bible says, which is what we do. But their theory says you got to have back at this time just these little stars starting to form, not huge galaxies. There's not enough time from the Big Bang for this to happen, is what they will tell us. So we looked at this last week a bit. Let me zoom in on this a little bit here again and just see that this is their problem. I wanted to look at a few quotes by some scientists, astronomers, evolutionary astronomers, directly related with these findings that are just now making reports about them, and they are stumped. Of course, the only other conclusion is it didn't evolve, right? It was created. It was made all at once by the one who said he made it. And just like biology and animals and people didn't evolve, neither did the universe. So let's read a few of these things. And I'm not, this is a big subject, but hopefully you can understand what they've done is they claim, well, let me just show you here. Let me back up. I just jumped too fast. So here's our little, the furthest that they were able to see with his telescopes before Hubble was right about this distance, 13.1 billion miles. When Hubble came along, they could see about 13.3 billion miles. But now with Webb, they can see clear down this distance. And of course, they believe there's a Big Bang that happened before that. Okay, we'll zoom in. Let's look at a few things here. And if you have any questions, obviously I can answer any questions later or after this particular little thing here. We just wanted to, this will be the last time we talk about that. I just think it's so exciting to see some of these things. As you look out into what God has made, God shows us, his presence. He doesn't show us evolution. He shows us that he created these things. So let's start with this guy, Joel LaHaye, assistant professor of astronomy and astrophysics at Penn State. Penn State is the university that has been doing the studying of the images, okay? CNN, February 23rd, so just a couple weeks ago, this guy says, these objects are way more massive than anyone expected. We expected only to find tiny young baby galaxies at this point in time. But we've discovered galaxies as mature as our own, and what was previously understood to be the dawn of the universe. We don't get it. How could this be? Now that we can see this far, we weren't supposed to be able to see galaxies out this far back, what they think is far back in time, before the Big Bang. Okay, he continues on here, same article, or the same interview. The revelation that massive galaxy formation began extremely early in the history of the universe upends what many of us have thought was settled science. I love that when they say settled science. It turns out we found something so unexpected, it actually creates problems for science. It calls the whole picture of early galaxy formation into question. Notice this little phrase here, causes a problem for science. What does it cause a problem for, really?
Those who don't believe in God.
Those who don't believe God made this. And it doesn't cause a problem for science. It causes a problem for evolutionary ideology. That's the problem, which he calls science, of course. So, reading on a little bit more in the same interview, we've been informally calling these objects universe breakers, and they have been living up to their name so far. So it doesn't make sense to these experts in astronomy and astrophysics why these things are actually there. Let's move on to Erica Nelson, an astrophysicist at the University of, I think it must be Boulder, Colorado, and a co-author of this study. She's very much involved in all this that's going on. She says, you shouldn't have had time to make things that have as many stars as the Milky Way that fast. It's just crazy that these things even exist. She continues on, it's bananas. I love that technical term she uses. It's bananas. You just don't expect the early universe to be able to organize itself that quickly. These galaxies should not have had time to form. I love it when this stuff comes up like this. And again, it's not what we base our faith on as these scientific discoveries. We base our faith upon what we believe to be true, which is God's word, and how he did it is very clear. But I love it when science, when those who are making these discoveries find out that evolution, there is no scientific evidence for it. Okay. Last one here. Ivo Labi, the study's head author and associate professor at Australia's Swinburne University of Technology, and you don't need all that stuff. I just want to make sure we have the quotes. Said, we just discovered the impossible, impossibly early, impossibly massive galaxies. Okay. So how did it happen if this universe didn't evolve? Right here. There's our cover slide right here that we use most every Sunday. In the beginning, God. Genesis 1, verse 1. Created the heavens and the earth. And let's just read on about, in beginning verse 14 here. Then God said, this is Genesis 1:14, then God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be signs and for the seasons and for days and years, and let them be for lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, and it was so. God made the two great lights, the greater light to govern the day, the lesser light to govern the night. He made the stars also. God placed them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth and to govern the day and the night and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. There was evening, there was morning, a fourth day. Not 3.5 billion years ago, it started all happening. This is what God has done. Don.
God has already warned us of all this gibberish. 1 Timothy 6, 20 and 21. O Timothy, guard what has been entrusted to you. Avoid worldly and empty chatter and the opposition and the opposing arguments of what is falsely called knowledge, or in some versions, science.
Knowledge.
Which some have professed and thus gone astray from the faith. Grace be with you.
Amen. Appreciate that. Exactly. So when you hear, but here's the thing. It's good for us to be able to just review this quickly so that when we talk with someone that's so convinced this everything's evolved, even the universe, that we can say, well, look, what about the Webb telescope? Recent discoveries, it's like, how do you explain galaxies back here? So here's the thing. Let's go back for just a second. We need to rename this, not the Big Bang back here, but the Big Bust. I like that word better. The Big Bust. The theory's busted. It's no longer even a good theory as far as the natural origin of the universe. But that's the problem to begin with. They won't allow for the fact that the evidence shows that God made all things. Okay, anything else before we get back into our context in Genesis? All righty. We left off with the end of chapter 25 in Genesis, here where Jacob has just bought the birthright of his brother Esau. And let's look at the last few verses here, beginning verse 33. Then Jacob said, "Swear to me on this day." So he swore to him, that is Esau swore to him, and sold his birthright to Jacob. And Jacob gave Esau bread and stew of lentils. Then he ate and drank, arose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Okay, so at least it's off. And we talked quite a bit about that, read some New Testament quotes referring to that. Chapter 26. A lot of this now, as we get into the later part of Genesis, is going to be some narrative we're going to read through rather quickly, and we get on some interesting and important points here and there. But we'll be reading through some of these parts pretty fast. Anytime you want to make a comment or ask a question, raise your hand. So Genesis 26, verse 1 through 5. As we mentioned before, there was a famine in the land now. Beside the first famine that was in the days of Abraham, and Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines in Gerar. Abimelech, does that sound like a familiar name? Yep. Remember, who else went to Abimelech? Abraham. 80 years ago, we read of Abraham going to Abimelech and the trouble that he had there with his wife Sarah. Okay, hold on a second, Don. Oh.
Perhaps Abimelech in this case is just a title and not the same person because of the time difference between the two events.
That's very possible, very likely. Abimelech, the word means father king. So it could have been a title for some of the kings in the Philistine country, like Pharaoh. Pharaoh was a term used for like 2,500 years back in Old Testament times. Pharaoh means great house. And it originally started out to be the great house of Egypt, and then here's the king of the great house of Egypt. So yeah, maybe so. So likely someone, maybe his son, or someone who became king after him, or it could maybe, he could have lived this long. It could be him, but probably not. Okay. And so here it is that he goes to this king of the Philistines in Gerar, and that is basically, if you remember here, we've got most of our time we're spending in Hebron or Beersheba. Isaac likes this area down here, and Roihai, but now we're coming a little further west to Gerar. And Abraham had also been here earlier, and that's when he some 80 years ago, came in contact with the other Abimelech. Okay. Verse 2, then the Lord appeared to him and said, as appeared to Isaac, do not go down to Egypt. Live in the land of which I shall tell you. Dwell in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and your descendants I give all these lands, and I will perform the oath which I swore to Abraham your father. So unlike what he's going to say to Jacob some years later, where there's a famine that comes later on, he says, Jacob, go to Egypt, and we'll take care of you there for a while, and then come back. He says, stay here. Don't go to Egypt, where there must have been more resources, but stay here. And he continues in verse 4, and I will make your descendants multiply as the stars of the heaven. I will give to your descendants all these lands, and in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Same promise as he gave to Abraham. But why is he doing this? Isaac, I think, was a righteous and good man, but the reason given here is, I'm doing this because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. Not perfectly, but he was a man of faith, and you could tell it by what he did. So, that's the promise now given to Isaac. Verse 6, so Isaac dwelt in Gerar, and the men of the place asked about his wife, and he said, she is my sister. Wait a minute, didn't we just read this also just a few chapters back with Abraham, who said that Sarah was her sister, his sister? He says, she's my sister. For he was afraid to say she is my wife, because he thought, lest the men of the place kill me for Rebekah, because she is beautiful to behold. Moral of the story is, marry an ugly woman, and you won't be bothered this way. People won't be coming. Don has a point here. I made the mistake and married a beautiful woman, but I don't have this problem.
You'll notice that when Abraham said she's my sister, at least he was half telling the truth. But in this case, Isaac is totally not telling the truth, even though Rebekah is kind of his cousin, like first cousin once removed type thing. But
that's he's technically being completely deceptive, though maybe sister could say relative, basically. Point is, even if that was the case, which it is, she's my cousin. Oh, I left out the fact that she happens to be, my wife. That's an important point. But same exact thing. I mean, he just basically follows in Abraham's footsteps. A number of things that are mentioned about Isaac that his father did. Obviously, he didn't learn from his father that can be difficult when you make that kind of deception. So verse 8, now it came to pass when he had been there a long time that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked through a window and saw, and there was Isaac showing endearment to Rebekah, his wife. Then Abimelech called Isaac and said, quite obviously, she is your wife, so how could you say she is my sister? Now here he doesn't give the same explanation that Abraham did about, well, she is my sister, which was true, a half-sister. Isaac said to him, because I said, lest I die on account of her. And Abimelech said, what is this you have done to us? Do you think maybe Abimelech, even if it's not the same guy, remembers what happened to maybe his dad or the previous king, that, we got a lot of trouble came our way when we took Sarah and all these, things came on us. So, what are you doing to us? One of the people might soon have lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt on us. So Abimelech charged all his people, saying, he who touches this man or his wife shall surely be put to death. Okay. I think this is the last time this particular mistake or this particular course of action is taken by Jacob. Never does this, as far as I realize. Okay, moving on. Then Isaac sowed in that land and reaped in the same year 100-fold. And the Lord blessed him. The man began to prosper, continued prospering until he became very prosperous. Prosperity is the word here. He just made him rich. For he had possessions of flocks and possessions of herds and a great number of servants. So the Philistines envied him. I don't even have one servant. He had a great number of servants. Okay, I'm not being jealous of him, but He had many servants. So the Philistines envied him. Now the Philistines had stopped up all the wells which his father's servants had dug in the days of Abraham, his father, and they had filled them with earth. Not very nice people. Here's a well they've discovered in Beersheba, okay, which is close to where he is. And they believe this is during the time that Abraham lived. Some even make arguments and bring up some evidence that I don't think is conclusive that this was one of Abraham's many wells. Now it could be, but who knows? I mean, you can't go back and ask him. And here's the same view, but looking down into the well, that metal bar just to keep people like Joel from jumping in and trying to check it out, keep my grandkids from getting into trouble. So yeah, that's a later addition, obviously. So tourists won't fall down into the well. But we're going to hear a lot about wells in the next chapter or so. And we think, oh, what's all the deal about wells? I mean, who cares? Says a people who have their water plumbed in and don't even think about it when they turn their faucets on, and live in an area that you could go outside most of the time and look up and open your mouth and you've got plenty of it. So not only did they not have indoor plumbing or any kind of plumbing at all, they live in a fairly arid climate. Even though maybe it wasn't as deserty as sometimes it's pictured, it was a land flowing with milk and honey, we learned later on, so it was beautifully productive. But still, if you don't live near a river and you don't get the rain and you get droughts, not just droughts, famines coming along, then wells are very important, not just for your house, the whole neighborhood, the whole town depended on it. So, big a thing, and that's why a lot of this stuff is being said about this well here. So here's maybe a well that something like David would have dug. And we continue reading in verse 20 or 16, and Abimelech said to Isaac, "Go away from us, for you are much mightier than we." That Isaac departed from there and pitched his tent in the valley of Gerar and dwelt there. Well, he didn't go very far because he was dwelling in Gerar and Beersheba, a little bit of both. Well, no, Gerar, I guess, at this time. So must have been out of the main area of the town and the village or what a community, and down into the valley where there weren't a lot of the Philistines, not Phoenicians. I always get those mixed up, Phoenicians and Philistines. Okay, he dwelt there, and Isaac dug again the wells of water which they had dug in the days of Abraham his father, for the Philistines had stopped them up after the death of Abraham. He called them by the names which his father had called them. Did we just read that? No, I don't think so. Okay, keep going. Verse 19. Also Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found a well of running water there. But the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herdsmen, saying, "The water is ours." So he called the name of that well Esek, because they quarreled with him. And so Esek is just that, a word meaning contention. Then they dug another well, and they quarreled over that one also. So he called its name Sitnah, which is adversary. And he moved from there and dug another well, and they did not quarrel over it. So he called its name Rehoboth, because he said, "For now the Lord has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land." And Rehoboth just simply means broad places. So we finally found a place we could dig a well, this essential thing that we need to have, and the Philistines aren't giving us trouble because of it. Okay, continuing on. Verse 23, then he went up from there to Beersheba, and the Lord appeared to him the same night and said, "I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not fear, for I am with you. I will bless you and multiply your descendants for my servant Abraham's sake." So he built an altar there and called on the name of the Lord, and he pitched his tent there, and there Isaac's servants dug a well. Dug a well again. Got to dig a well. When you go anywhere, you got to dig a well. If you want to drink, you got to dig a well. And sometimes the wells were a little bit different too. They were larger pits that they had stairs that went down, and then you were able to get the water out of not too deep. But when the water was deep, they had to. I don't know how they dug deep wells, but they were absolutely vital. They dug a well. Okay. Verse 26. Then Abimelech came to him from Gerar with Ahuzah, one of his friends. and Phicol, the commander of his army. And Isaac said to them, why have you come to me, since you hate me and have sent me away from you? But they said, we have certainly seen that the Lord is with you. So we said, let there now be an oath between us, between you and us. Let us make a covenant with you, that you will do us no harm, since we have not touched you, and since we have done nothing to you but good. I like that one, except fill up all your wells. That's not in there. I put that in there. Nothing but good, and has sent you away in peace. You are now the blessed of the Lord. Two things here. Abimelech could see, just like Abimelech, the other Abimelech with Abraham, that God was blessing Isaac greatly. He became rich and became large. And so, you don't want to have trouble with someone or a nation or a people that God is blessing. He was that smart. Let's make a covenant. Let's make an oath. Like he says, we've done nothing to you that good, or, to you but good, which wasn't totally true, because they messed around with some of his people were giving him trouble over the wells they were digging. Okay. Verse 30. So he made them a feast, and they ate and drank. Then they arose early in the morning and swore an oath with one another, and Isaac sent them away, and they departed from him in peace. It came to pass the same day that Isaac's servants came and told him about the well which they had dug, and said to him, we have found water. So he called it Sheba. Sheba, which means oath. They just made an oath, right? Therefore, the name of the city is Beersheba to this day, which means well of the oath. So even though we've talked about Beersheba all the way up to this time, remember, it's Moses who later is writing about these events. And he already knew what the name of this place was, and he used it. But this is when it got its name, is when they made this oath here with King with Abimelech, and they dug this well, and there's Beersheba. When Esau was 40 years old, okay, we're changing context a bit here. He took as wives, now Esau is Jacob's brother. He took as wives Judith, the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and Basemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite. And they were a grief of mind to Isaac and Rebekah. Married foreign wives, people from the land of Canaan, Hittites, and they were a grief. Wish we had all the kids in here right now. Don't marry somebody that's going to grieve your parents, okay? Or your grandparents, okay? Since my kids are already married. Thank you, Sam, for not marrying somebody that would grieve me, or your mama. Go ahead, Don.
In-law trouble. That's the first mention of in-laws.
In-law trouble. Well, yeah, that's right.
Troubles
okay.
with in-laws. Also, I wanted to say that back there when the Ahuzzath, the counselor for Abimelech, and then there's Phicol. There was a Phicol, or Phicol, Phicol. There was that's probably a title too, because there was a Phicol back in Genesis chapter 21 also when Abraham was there. So that may be a title as well as Abimelech.
Could be. When you see those names repeated, sometimes you wonder.
Yeah, commander of the army was Phicol. So that perhaps, I'm just saying that perhaps that wasn't his name, that was just a title. So.
Right. Thank you. So we get in these indications here, Esau doesn't care a lot about what his parents cared about or what God in turn cared about. Yeah, he's going out to marry these women of the nations. And the Canaanites, they believed in like 234 gods, all different kinds of gods. El was the chief god, and Baal, you know that name, and then Asherah. And these were terrible gods. They had all sorts of terrible rites and things that you would do if you were practicing and worshiping them. In fact, we read over here in Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 9 through 12, when the children of Israel go into, come out of Egypt and go into the promised land. This is what they're being told over here that Moses tells them. He said, when you come into the land which the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not learn to follow the abominations of those nations. There shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or his daughter pass through the fire, or one who practices witchcraft, or soothsayer, or one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or one who conjures spells, or a medium, or a spiritist, or one who calls up the dead. I mean, look at just on, these things that they would do. For all who do these things are an abomination to the Lord. And because of these abominations, the Lord your God drives them out from before you. So this was the reason that he brought them in and took over the land of Canaan. The people who lived there weren't fit to live. And many of them were killed and destroyed when they came into the land of Canaan. And this is the kind of ladies, women, that Esau marries. So that, I don't think it was just the way they, took care of their hair or their clothes or their food. It was probably these practices that were a grief to Isaac and Rebekah. Okay, that's the end of chapter 26. Moving on. 27. These chapters go fairly quickly. Okay, now it came to pass, when Isaac was old, and his eyes were so dim that he could not see, that he called Esau his older son and said to him, "My son." And he answered, "Here I am." Then he said, "Behold, now I am old. I do not know the day of my death. Now therefore, please take your weapons, your quiver, and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me, and make me savory food such as I love." We already heard about this before, that Isaac loved Esau because he was a man of the field. He'd go out there and get this wild game, and he loved that, the taste of wild game. And make me savory food that I love, and bring it to me that I may eat, that my soul may bless you before I die. Now, it's kind of interesting here that if you look at the timelines again, he may have felt like his death was fairly imminent, but he actually lived another 40 years. He lived until Jacob went to Padan Aram, back to Haran, to get his wife Rachel, and all the time he spent there until he came back. And even if you look at the timeline here, we've used this before, Abraham's life and Sarah and Isaac, here we're talking about, he lives clear on down into the birth, to the life of Joseph. So though he was weak at this time, he lived apparently another 40 years. So the timeline, if you put it all in order, works out. So he must have been feeble for a while, I guess. It's the only explanation I have. Just so you know, it's a little bit of a fact. He does live longer. All right. Now Rebekah was listening when Isaac spoke to Esau his son, and Esau went to the field to hunt game and bring it. So Rebekah spoke to Jacob her son. Remember, she preferred Jacob. Also remember, it was told her that the younger would serve, the older would serve the younger. She knows that. So Rebekah spoke to Jacob her son, saying, "Indeed, I heard your father speak to Esau your brother, saying, 'Bring me game and make savory food for me, that I may eat and bless you in the presence of the Lord before my death. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice according to what I command you.'" A little bit there about, okay, who's actually making this decision? I mean, obviously Jacob agrees, but here she says, "I'm commanding you to do this, and I'm your mom. Go now to the flock and bring me from there 2 choice kids of the goats, and I will make savory food from them for your father, such as he loves. Then you shall take it to your father, that he may eat it, and that he may bless you before his death." Now remember, Esau has already sold his birthright. But now we're talking about something called a blessing, which was something in addition to the birthright. The birthright gave you certain particular rights and privileges, and I mean, you were the head of the family then. You got 2/3, I think, of the portion. Through you, the nation is going to be called, and of course, in God's promise, it's going to be all nations will be blessed someday through you. So that's already been sold. So this is the blessing. This is just more things that God will bring to you if you get the blessing. Okay, you take, going to go ahead, what was it, verse 10. "Then you shall take it to your father, and he may eat it, and he may bless you before his death." Okay. "And Jacob said to Rebekah his mother, 'Look, Esau my brother is a hairy man, and I am a smooth-skinned man. Perhaps my father will feel me, and I shall seem to be a deceiver to him, and I shall bring a curse on myself and not a blessing. So I may be trying to sneak in here and get this blessing. I may get the exact opposite. But his mother said to him, let your curse be on me, my son. Only obey my voice and go and get them for me. I don't know if that's possible to take somebody's curse and put them out of that, but she said anyway, right? And he went, got them, and brought them to his mother, and his mother made savory food such as his father loved. Then Rebekah took the choicest clothes of her elder son Esau, which were with her in the house, and put them on Jacob, her young son. And she put the skins of the kids of the goats on his hands and on the smooth part of his neck. Then she gave the savory food and the bread which she had prepared into the hand of her son Jacob. And now he goes in. So he went to his father and said, my father. And he said, here I am. Who are you, my son? Jacob said to his father, I am Esau, your firstborn. Obviously, deceptive. A lie. There's no way you can get around it. You kind of wonder how God chooses Jacob was he was so deceptive. And yet we read about in the New Testament, Esau despising his birthright. We read nothing about Jacob was a deceiver. Though actually later on, he gets it back. It's kind of neat when we deal with Rachel and Leah later on. It's kind of cool how he gets his just desserts. But right now, it's just obvious. He's just telling a lie. Now, whether this is because he and his mom know that really the Lord has told her that he's going to be the chief, and this is the only way he can figure out how to get that. I don't know, but it's still not right to lie. I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done just as you told me. Please arise, sit and eat my game, that your soul may bless me. But Isaac said to his son, how is it that you have found it so quickly, my son? And he said, because the Lord your God brought it to me. Woo. Now again, that's a lie, but we're going to read a verse in a little bit here that shows that God arranged all this before. So not the lying part, that's the choice that Jacob gave. But still, the fact that he gets the blessing is something God intended and arranged to happen. Isaac didn't have anything to do with who was going to be the one that was going to be blessed here. God foreordained this. And maybe Jacob was thinking here too, yeah, I know I'm supposed to be the one, and Dad just doesn't see it. I don't know. But it's not right, that's for sure. Isaac said to Jacob, please come near that I may feel you, my son, whether you are really my son Esau or not. So Jacob went near to Isaac, his father, and he felt him and said, the voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. And he did not recognize him because his hands were hairy like his brother Esau's hands. So he blessed him. Then he said, are you really my son Esau? He said, I am. Okay. I'm not arguing a case for Jacob, that's for sure. He's lying. Genesis 27, or rather verse 25 to 27, he said, bring it near to me, and I will eat of my son's game, so that my soul may bless you. So he brought it near to him, and he ate, and he brought him wine, and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, come near now and kiss me, my son. And he came near and kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his clothing and blessed him and said, surely the smell of my son is like the smell of a field, which the Lord has blessed. Therefore may God give you of the dew of heaven, of the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine. Let peoples serve you, and nations bow down to you. Be master over your brethren, and let your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be those who bless you. Wow, wouldn't it be great to get that kind of a blessing that has the power of God behind it? Don't know exactly how this is done, if this is inspired. I'm thinking probably it is. You know, that God, Isaac doesn't just choose the things out, but it doesn't say how it's done. He blesses them, and these blessings are binding. They can't be changed, and we see that in a bit. Okay, moving on. Verse 30. Now, as it happened, as soon as Isaac finished blessing Jacob, and Jacob had scarcely gone out from the presence of Isaac his father, that Esau his brother came in from his hunting. He also had made savory food and brought it to his father and said to his father, "Let my father arise and eat of his son's game, that your soul may bless me." And his father Isaac said to him, "Who are you?" I was like, what's going on? So he said, "I'm your son, your firstborn, Esau." Then Isaac trembled exceedingly and said, "Who? Where's the one who hunted game and brought it to me? I ate all of it before you came, and I have blessed him, and indeed he shall be blessed." When Esau heard the words of his father, he cried with an exceedingly great and bitter cry and said to his father, "Bless me also, O my father." But he said, "Your brother came with deceit and has taken away your blessing." And Esau said, "Is he not rightly named Jacob? For he has supplanted me these 2 times. He's lived up to his name, that's for sure. He took away my birthright, and now look, he has taken away my blessing." And he said, "Have you not reserved a blessing for me?" Then Isaac answered and said to Esau, "Indeed, I have made him your master, and all his brethren I have given to him as servants. With grain and wine I have sustained him. What shall I do now for you, my son?" And Esau said to his father, "Have you only one blessing, my father? Bless me also, O my father." And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. Okay, what am I doing here? Okay, that's what I was going to make this point here. So what's going on here? We got to figure, I mean, part of us would think, okay, because Jacob was the better guy. He's a liar, that's for sure, but he loved what God, he was interested in what God was interested in. He wanted the birthright. Esau didn't care much about the birthright at all. So it's like, and he was concerned about things that the God was concerned about. But we read over here in Romans 9, verse 10 through 13, it may not have had much to do with anything about of what kind of person Esau was and what kind of person Jacob was. Over here, Paul is telling us about how God foreordains certain things. And here he says, "But when Rebekah also had conceived by one man, even by our father Isaac, for the children not yet being born, nor having done any good or evil, that the purpose of God according to election might stand, not of works, but of him who calls, it was said to her, the older shall serve the younger." Okay? And then he has a quote here. Now he quotes out of Malachi 1, verse 2. He says, as it is written, Jacob I have hated, but Jacob I have loved, but Esau I have hated. So, but this Paul is telling us here is that God chooses certain things the way he does, whatever that is. At this particular time, he chose that the younger should be the one to take on the blessing and the birthright, even though by law it was due Esau. And it didn't depend on what they did, apparently, because before they were born, God made this decision. And now he's telling us about it. Now, this whole thing about I love Jacob, but Esau I hated was really just a strong form of preference. I preferred, not that he hated Esau for any particular reason because he was immoral, though maybe I'm sure he had a big problem with that. But it's like what Jesus tells us, that we should love him and hate our father and mother comparatively. It's a comparative thing. It's not an abject, you shall hate, abhor. So that's what's happening. I chose this man over this man because I had a reason. It wasn't because of what they did. One wonders, though, if maybe he knew what they were going to do, so he chose for that reason. Maybe, but it basically kind of sounds like it's not. Yeah, Don, sorry, holding you off there.
Okay. Jacob was blessed because Jacob was the Messiah. The Messiah came through Jacob, right?
Yes.
So in a way, Isaac was blessing the Messiah, at least the father of the Messiah, right?
Yes.
So you notice when Isaac says, "Are you really my son Esau?" And Jacob says, or he said, or Jacob says, I am, right? Well, who is I am?
Oh, but you're thinking, I don't think
Right.
he's talking about I
Right,
am like
but-
God is I am.
But, yes, God is I am, but his seed was going to be I am. Because Jesus called himself I am, right? So there it is. Are you Esau, my son? No, I am.
Yeah, maybe. That's a bit of a stretch. I appreciate it, though.
There could be a connection.
I got you.
That's all I'm saying. That's
okay.
all I'm saying. Just consider that.
I will. You got some great ideas, Don. You do. Let me finish up by saying, now let's be careful and realize something, that even though God predetermined this, he had his reasons, he doesn't willy-nilly bless everybody or anybody just randomly. This is an exception here. How God does bless us, we read, I went backwards instead of forward, is many verses that tell us, but here's Psalm chapter 1, verse 1 through 6. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scorn. That's how God's blessings come normally. In this particular case with Esau and Jacob, he had some plan that he was going to enact, and it wasn't according to the way the man was going to do it. It was according to his election. But this is how normally God does things. But his delight is in the law of the Lord. In his law he meditates day and night. He should be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, that brings forth its fruit in season, whose leaf also shall not wither. And whatever he does shall prosper. The ungodly are not so, but are like the chaff which the wind drives away. Therefore the ungodly shall not stand in the judgment, nor the sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the ungodly shall perish. So that's the principle we have all throughout the Bible. You want to be blessed? Do well. Be like Abraham, trust God. If you don't, you're going to be, the cursings will come and the hard times will come. So this particular election God's choice between Jacob and Esau was just a plan that God has, and was going to fulfill, and that's just what God does. It's different than being blessed because of how we live. Okay, time is up. Try to end on time. Okay. Thank you for your participation this morning. Yeah.